Okay, I don't mind sharing with you that Chandler Bing was my favorite of the Friends on Friends. And I think he was my favorite because of the way that Matthew Perry played him. The relatable, know-it-all, the insecure, but still likable guy. Like, that's not easy to pull off. Today on the podcast, we're going to remember Matthew Perry and the laughs that he gave us. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Man, it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel fully real, I think. Matthew Perry was only 54 years old. He died earlier this week. There are like a dozen Chandler Bing one-liners that you can drop and people would immediately recognize. He was, I think, the realest of the group of friends, the one with the unexplainable job. No one ever knew what Chandler did for a living. Always looking for a laugh. You could almost sense that in every scene of Friends. Chandler Bing, Matthew Perry is always looking for a laugh. And we also know something about Matthew Perry in real life, which is that he, off-screen, was always looking for a laugh too. After Friends, he continued to crack us up. He did shows like Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip and The Odd Couple. Matthew had this amazing quality, I think, as an actor. He could make people root for, I think, objectively unlikable characters, and yet he could make you go, oh yeah, this person, they're the hero. To talk about all of this, Kevin Fallon is here. He's an editor and a writer at the Daily Beast. He's also a pal. Kevin Fallon, good morning.
Morning, Elamin.
I'm happy that you're here. Listen, it's always tragic when someone's life is cut short. I think Matthew Perry's death feels especially jarring. Can we talk about why that might be?
It's always surreal when someone extremely famous dies, because when you grow up and get older watching someone on TV and in movies, they kind of just seem to exist forever. But there's something different, I think, about Matthew Perry and probably what we'll find out of the entire cast of Friends. In the first place, Matthew Perry dying at just 54, that's young as it is, die in your 50s.
Yeah.
But for generations, not just, us who grew up watching Friends and our parents who watched it with us, but now for younger people who discovered the show on streaming services and turned it into the biggest show in the world again 30 years after it premiered.
Yeah.
Matthew Perry is someone who's frozen in time at one age, in his 20s and 30s, as this vibrant, vivid character living in New York City and experiencing all of the exciting, thrilling things that happen to you at that age. So it's really surreal to think about a person who we view at that time in their life being gone. It's almost unthinkable in a way that is, I think, a little bit different from when we get to watch an actor age in his career, because again, he's just so indelible as Chandler and Friends.
You, in your lovely piece, you described his role as Chandler Bing as the Trojan horse on Friends. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think we all know that Chandler Bing was a sarcastic person.
Yeah.
There was not a moment that could pass in the show without him firing off some cynical one-liner or, smarmy observation.
Yes.
But when you watch the 10 seasons of that show, the emotional arc of how these characters have grown in a decade of their lives is told through Chandler. He's the one who, learns to admit to himself what he wants from life, the emotions that he wants to validate, who starts to let people in. And it's not that he never loved or experienced a love from his friends. I think that's something that was really special about the show. Yes, he was cynical and sarcastic, but he was still very much part of the intimate connection that these people had. But over the course of the 10 seasons, you watch him start to accept it and to thrive in it and to really change as a person. And I think that's something that would have been surprising if you look at that first episode and think that this is just going to be the funny guy.
Right. I mean, like, there's something about how each friend sort of occupies a different brand of comedy, if you will. And with the Chandler character, you would think this is the one that is going to have the least growth, because their whole job is just to provide these one-liners and sort of be closed off to the interactions from everybody else. And yet Chandler was the one that connected with people. What do you think it was about Chandler that made him resonate so much with people?
A lot of it, I think, has to do with how smart Matthew Perry was and how he approached that character. He knows something, which is that there's this fallacy that sarcasm is this shield, that it's just this negativity that it's this mask for pain and that you're not going to let anything else out. When actually, I think sarcasm is an expression of the most vulnerable parts of us. It's, announcing to the world that, I'm feigning self-confidence. I'm asking for attention and validation because there's something inside of me that really, really needs that. And I think that's something that we can all relate to. Like, Elamin, you've known me for a while, and I think I'm self-aware enough to know that I'm a sarcastic person.
Yes.
But you also know that I'm an extremely emotional person.
Yeah.
And I think the beautiful thing that Matthew Perry realized is how those two things sit side by side together. That cynicism and wryness and emotion and feeling are two things that are inextricably linked.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that you and Matthew Perry share in common, it's that ability to be sarcastic right up until the moment where you make me cry. So you know what? You absolutely share those two things. I want to play a clip from the show that fans will probably recognize.
Anybody know a good tailor?
You need some clothes altered?
No. I'm just looking for a man to draw on me with chalk.
Why don't you go see Frankie? My family's been going to him forever. He did my first suit when I was 15. No, wait. 16. No, excuse me, 15. All right, when was 1990?
Okay, you have to stop the Q-tip when there's resistance.
Matthew is known for just improving bits on the show, including that Q-tip line. Where do you see Matthew Perry's influence on TV right now?
It's so funny. We're talking about how, indelible, ubiquitous Chandler and his character is. The second he said one word in that clip, I knew exactly what the scene was. I could hear already his line delivery.
Yeah.
But I think to answer your question, what I see now is, like we've talked about this idea that, characters that can be caustic and can be prickly and smarmy, can also be the emotional beating heart of a series. And I see that, when I watch something like Schitt's Creek with Dan Levy's character. There are certainly characters in something like Ted Lasso, Hannah Waddingham's character, Brett Goldstein's character, where we have learned to really fully embrace the marriage of those two polar opposites. And I also think what Matthew Perry and the entire cast of Friends showed the world is just how infectious it is when a cast really does seem like a family. You can't replicate whatever that connection was that the six of them had unless it was completely genuine. You can't manufacture that. And I think when we see what have now become the greatest shows or the biggest sitcoms in the world since then, like The Big Bang Theory or something like that, they are following in that same mold of chemistry and connection that he was such a key part of.
I think I just being aware of the possibility of reducing Matthew Perry to just the one role, because of course it is the role that we all know, the role that we all connect to. But you know what? He continued to play the same kind of character. And I think the same kind of character with a lot of empathy and a lot of intelligence. He played the same kind of character. You know me. I'm going to bring up Aaron Sorkin in this conversation.
I knew that was coming.
Of course. Well, I really love that show. They did one season of the show called Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. And he again played this prickly know-it-all who thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. And he managed to make that character incredibly likable. And I just loved him for it so much. We knew him forever, I think, as this, this funny man. But later in life, he began opening up about the addiction struggles that he faced while filming. I want to play you a clip from an interview that Matthew did on Q last year about his time on Friends.
I didn't watch the show and haven't watched the show because I could go drinking, opiates, drinking, cocaine. I could tell season by season by how I looked. And I don't think anybody else can, but I certainly could.
It's tough to hear him say that because on the one hand, it suggests that he didn't necessarily see the way that he brought us joy. He sort of knew about it because we told him about it, but maybe he didn't actually get to experience it himself. But hear him say that. How do you think his honesty has recontextualized his career and his comedy to people?
I mean, I know we were just talking about his other projects besides Friends, but I think a lot of us know that he was going through his addiction issues while filming Friends. And he's spoken about how, he would film scenes like the wedding between Chandler and Monica, one of the biggest moments of pop culture history.
Yeah. And
he was shuttled back and forth from a rehab center before and after that.
Yeah.
So at the height of his career, that's what he was going through. And I think it's really poignant to think about that and the other side that he, eventually came out of after a long, long, long journey. Is to remember, again, the things that are bubbling underneath a person who might seem to be strong and to be, confident and have their wits about them the way that Chandler did. And I think it recontextualized looking at how he interacted with the world and especially with the people who loved him. Because we could then sort of project onto what we were seeing Chandler going through with Monica and Rachel and, everyone on Friends, with what he and the cast members were also going through in real life. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to remember, that, the people that we might dismiss because of the way that they present themselves to the world actually have things that they're battling as well.
I think it's fair to say that Matthew Perry's got this boundless legacy as someone who, taught us that sarcasm can connect us, that these one-liners are attempts from people to sort of reach out and connect to each other. The streaming service Max just announced that they put this tribute to Matthew Perry at the beginning of all 10 seasons of Friends. I think a lot of people discovered the show for the first time during the pandemic, and with streaming, new generations will continue to do that. What do you hope new generations get out of discovering Matthew Perry?
The best thing that I found about him and that has affected me the most was watching those really emotional milestone scenes on Friends where he's revealing his emotions. He's getting married, he's having kids, and these are all these moments of growth. And you would think those would be the heartwarming, heartbreaking moments. But for me, it was always the bad joke that he would deliver to punctuate whatever was going on in those scenes. He couldn't. And it wasn't just that he couldn't let a beautiful moment breathe in the emotion of that. It was sort of this like grace note to a moment of wonderfulness where he had to say something cynical to acknowledge that part of him, because it almost made it seem like this was more real. Like, if I make this bad joke, then this wonderful thing that's happened to me, this emotion that I'm feeling, actually becomes more of a real thing. And I thought that is a really beautiful way to think about life, that you can have all the greatness, you can experience all the emotion, and you can still have in the back of your mind this skepticism and the cynicism that maybe you feel like you don't deserve all the best in the world, but you feel really lucky that it's actually happening to you.
It doesn't negate it. In many ways, actually makes it more pronounced, right?
Exactly.
Well, Kevin, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your beautiful thoughts.
Thank you, Elamin. It was really nice to talk about this.
Of course. Kevin Fallon is a writer and editor at The Daily Beast. He was in New York. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, a bit of a shift in gears here. I don't know what your street looks like right now, but I live on a section of my street that just doesn't get much trick-or-treat foot traffic. We're trying to inspire the trick-or-treaters to notice our part of the street, so this year we pulled out all the stops. There's like an inflatable light-up ghost in front of my house. It's like 8 feet tall. I don't know if it's going to work. We're going to find out. Our neighbors are going to be projecting a scary movie onto the wall. Everyone is trying their best because it is Halloween night. So, because of that, how could we not get into this?
What do they want?
They want to make her like them.
Papi! Tell me how to stop them.
It's too late.
That humming is very sinister. That is a trailer for the new film Five Nights at Freddy's. It was adapted from this wildly popular, very creepy video game series. And that ended up introducing this built-in fan base into this movie. And this movie gets to the top of the box office. That's right. It managed to unseat Taylor Swift's Eras Tour from the top spot. But does the movie actually live up to the expectations of the FNAF faithful? I don't know if it does, but Commotion resident horror expert Matt Hart has seen it. He's here to tell me. Matt, listen, I'm excited to talk about this movie. It is so creepy. All the advertising for it's just not my jam. But I saw it and I was like, you know who would love this? Matt Hart.
You are right. I do love kind of more the here's where I'm going to get dorky. I'm going to use the word lore for the first time. So the universe that it exists in, I think.
Let's talk about the universe. What is the premise of Five Nights at Freddy's?
Okay, so the real quick answer to that is essentially it revolves around a sinister or malicious Chuck E. Cheese restaurant. Okay, so if you're young, you might not remember Chuck E. Cheese. It's full of these creepy animatronic robots. It's a pizza parlor for kids with video games and stuff. Now picture that every night at midnight turns evil. And you've got Five Nights at Freddy's. The lore goes really far back, so I'm going to spare you that. You could dig as much as you want. But it's essentially that two kind of sinister businessmen came to a small town in the U.S., started this Chuck E. Cheese kind of competitor. Things went very poorly, and it is full of all kinds of sinister events and mayhem, basically.
Why do you think the video game is so popular?
There's a few factors here. You've got kind of something that's a little distasteful is the fact that some people tried to say that this was based on a true event. There was an actual shooting in 1993 at a former employee of a Chuck E. Cheese. It was not related to this in any way. We're talking years of difference in timeline, everything, right? But some people injected it with this kind of, oh, is this a real thing that happened? Which is, you know, like I said, kind of distasteful. But it's also really effective in scaring people and driving people to look into it. So you've got that. And then you've also got the fact that it actually looks aesthetically scary.
Right.
And it is this thing. We talked about this last time I was on with The Exorcist new release, that we are for some reason hardwired to be upset by something, the concept of something terrible happening in a really innocent situation.
Right.
So
like a Chuck E. Cheese type of.
Exactly.
Right.
And something terrible happens.
Okay, so we take this indie video game that's created by one guy, Scott Cawthon, on a very low budget. It becomes one of the most popular franchises in the gaming world, right? And then it spawns multiple sequels and spin-off games, and then it becomes this merchandising machine with toys, books, Halloween costumes. And now you get this movie, which has to walk, I think, the fine line of keeping the hardcore fans happy because they've followed this journey from game to merchandising to Halloween costumes to books, but also has to bring new people into the universe. How does a film do on that front?
Well, the lucky thing about this film and this franchise is that it's very deep. So they could pull a little bit. They could introduce you to it in just a small way, like I feel like they've done with the film.
Yeah.
Or you could really go down the rabbit hole. And there's all these storylines that go deep, 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 which is very cool. And also, I can't say this enough, that the marketing was really smart when it came out. It was largely on YouTube, which was new for marketing. So it gives it what I would call the Blair Witch effect, where people weren't sure if it was real, and it was grittier than your traditional horror games like Silent Hill, whatever.
Right.
And you had basically movies like Silent Hill or games like Silent Hill would be like the Taylor Swift to FNAF's Phoebe Bridgers or Jenny Lewis, a little edgier or grimier.
Sure.
Yeah, so it felt a bit more real to people, I think.
So Emma Tammy directed this movie. She was determined to get a PG-13 rating in the U.S. so that it could appeal to younger audience. You're showing up, you're like, all right, I'm excited about the lore that is established for this particular franchise, and now it's finally being translated into film. Did that take away, the idea that it's PG-13, did that take away from the overall experience for you?
It always does for me, I feel like. But
you're like, I want death. I want a lot of death, and I want it gruesome.
Well, here's the thing, is that FNAF isn't actually very gory to when you play. So it doesn't really need a lot of blood and guts, but some of the storylines are very dark and deep. So the actual subject matter is what's scary, and exploring that. Listen, gore is not as scary as your imagination ever will be. What goes on in your heads is the scariest place, and ending up having to invent this stuff.
Right.
The imagery will make it scarier. But having said that, they should be able to talk about these theories and these deeper, darker concepts, which they avoid a little bit in the film.
Did the movie work for you?
Short answer, no. Only because, listen, it's standing on the shoulders of giants. Like it was such an easy slam dunk for them. It's wildly popular already. It looks great. Jim Henson's doing the creatures in this. It's already popular. You just have to not mess it up. And I don't feel like they took a big enough swing or tried to do something different enough. They played it a little safe. And having said that, if you're a 13-year-old boy, largely, it probably will be your jam. And it also plays an important role in introducing kids like that into the horror genre. So they can toe the waters a bit before jumping into extreme movies.
Oh, and they will, I'm no doubt, get there. Listen, your opinion is you're not alone on this. Your opinion is shared by a lot of film critics. The movie has 26% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it has an audience score of 88%. I love when that happens, when the critics are like, this is not good. And then the audience are like, no, we love it. But the film ended up also raking in $80 million in the opening weekend at the box office. What do you think it is about this movie that audiences are responding to?
I do think it's a lot of fun to not know if something's real like this. You know what I mean? Where you can explore a bit, and it's up to you to see how deep you want to go with this lore. That's appealing to a lot of people, and it's a great concept. Like, I mean, who doesn't go into Chuck E. Cheese for the first time and think, something's off here. You know? Why is a rat serving me its favorite food? What's going on?
Matt,
it's just odd.
Thank you for externalizing a thought that has occurred to so many of us. Hey, I do have to ask you. I'm legally required to ask you. It's Halloween. What are you wearing tonight? Do you have a costume?
Oh, jeez, my secrets.
No.
I'm thinking. You know how you go as like a sexy something? I'm going to go as a sexy anesthesiologist. I actually don't do costumes very well.
Okay. Hey, no, that's a fantastic idea for a costume. That is Commotion's horror expert, Matt Hart, with his take on Five Nights at Freddy's. It's out in theaters right now.
What the fuck is this? My definition of a boombastic jazz style.
Going all the way back to 1991, the Dream Warriors, my definition of a boombastic jazz style. Matt, I see you're still around. Hey, does this bring back any memories for you, pal?
Did you notice our heads immediately start bobbing when this started? Yes, I was a big fan of the Dream Warriors. I still hearing this is incredible, and
I know
people don't know how important they were, and how they were kind of a big deal internationally for Canadian hip hop.
This was a moment, man. This was a moment, and the reason you're hearing right now is because on tomorrow's podcast, we're talking about this song's legacy and 3 other tracks, because they're all getting inducted into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame. I love the song, man, Snow's Informer, Drinking in LA, which tells me, Matt, that songs of our youth becoming inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame means that we're no longer young, right? That's how this feels?
Absolutely, I'll agree with that. And then I'll also say our heads are nodding, so we're right.
That is it for the podcast. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. Hey, I'm going to be here tomorrow. Hope to see you then.